What I want to talk about is, right now, the way we're looking at things, people go into space for limited times. We've had people Americans on Mir for a few months. Some Russians have been up for a year. If we ever get a lunar outpost, whether it's commercial or government, probably going to be limited tours of duty. How do we get beyond that? Well, I think the way we do things now, you're not going to have too many people volunteer to re-up, to do a second tour of duty. They'll be grateful for the experience they've had, and they've had to do without a lot of things. They've left their families behind, left their hobbies behind, their diversions, all sorts of things. Space is not the most comfortable place to be, at least on anything that we have up there now. It's cramped and so on. If you want, on the other hand, there's two things to look at. Long term, our goal is to transition from temporary tours of duty to people who live in space or on the Moon or Mars for the duration of their lives. We go to stay. How in the world do we ever get from what we have now to something like that? You can't just take somebody who, a lot of people will volunteer, you give them, say, you want to go to the space station for a week? Sure. Do 3 months? Sure. Do the rest of your life? You're not going to get any volunteers at all, or not too many. You have to give up too much. So how do we transition? There's some economic reasons to do this. Let's say we've got a moon base. If you have to bring everybody home after 3 months and rotate the crews, that's more costly than leaving. If you can get people to stay a little bit longer, then the ships that come in the meantime can be bringing up supplies and things to expand the base. You're not consuming all your effort and all your money just rotating people. So there's an economic reason on the one hand to encourage people to stay longer, and there's our long-term goal of getting beyond garrisons and outposts to settlements. What we have now is sardine can facilities. Everybody, you're packed in a cramped space and you try to get as much out of that space as possible. And people can put up with this for a relatively long period of time. We didn't have to wait for the space age to prove this. We've been proving it with submarines. 80 miles north of here in Manitowoc, there's moored a World War II submarine, and I've been through it several times, and it never ceases to amaze me. You walk through there and say, well, I can see 12 people being comfortable here. How many people did it hold? 84. It blows your mind, even hot racking, where you get out of a bunk and somebody else gets in it. Wow. But, in wartime, as long as people can put up with anything if it's for a limited amount of time. But if it's indefinite, you have to make it more comfortable. You have to make it more like what we would consider normal. There are, on the short end, there are ways to make small spaces seem more spacious simply by the way you lay them out, by good interior design. I remember some years ago, some young fellow we tried to sell NASA a plan for interior layout of the space station. It had everything that NASA wanted. It was just arranged different. And psychologically, it seemed a lot more spacious. They weren't interested. For example, you have 2 cubicles for sleeping cubicles. If you're not using them both at the same time, you could have a wall which is movable in between them, so when one is empty, the other one has more space. Little things like that. Instead of having the workstations can be baffled, the hallways can be made narrower, the common spaces, the wardrooms bigger. You can do things like have interchangeable decor, where the decor isn't fixed. You can have things make it so that people can change the decor in their private places, customize it, make it at home. Those who've gone away to school, been in a dormitory, you do that's one of the first things you do, is make it over into your own image, make it yourself, express yourself there. Giving people the opportunity to customize their private places and to agree on or take turns doing something with common spaces. It's one thing that would make it more livable, because it's not always the same. There are many visual tricks that can be done. Mirrors expand, psychologically a space. My day job the last several years has been fixing up old homes, and many times I've taken a small cramped bathroom and made it seem spacious just with mirrors. Imagine a small 4x4 wardroom, or people eat, play cards and stuff like that. If you had one blank wall and you put a backlit photo mural of some nice beach scene or mountain forest, makes it more pleasant, and so on. There's all sorts of tricks that can be done with small spaces. Eventually, you've got to allow people to have hobbies and diversions, their own things. If we get to the moon, I think we need to allow people to do art. It's one way. Every time we've opened a new frontier on Earth, we made it our own by learning to express ourselves artistically with the things that were there, whether they're rocks or the different kinds of trees, different kinds of wood, or whatever. And eventually, every place develops its own unique art forms. And if doing art, for example, on the moon, you'd eventually, with ceramics, paintings, whatever, it's a one way of acclimatizing yourself to the new area that you were in. I think it was 4 years ago, some of you have seen this, I had come across a quote where, in an encyclopedia, that the only known inorganic adhesive was silicon, water glass, sodium silicate. And I thought, well, instead of making paints with a solvent, would it work with an adhesive, liquid adhesive? So I tried metal oxide pigment powders, which you could extract from the regolith, and mixed them with sodium silicate. You have to do a little bit by little bit because it sets up real fast. But I produced a number of paintings, and those paintings could be made on the moon from things that are in the moon dust and so on. Another thing we have, can do to make things homier for people and more tolerable is change their routines, or allow them to change routines. Their duty assignments and so on, the schedules. And it's certainly good to have a place to get away. If you're confined to let's say a space station, there could be one module that you could take turns signing up for, where you could get away from everybody else and just relax for a while, escape, because sometimes you have to be alone, and being all crowded together can get old very fast. Right now we frown on relationships in space, and we're not going to get anywhere doing that. I think, well, NASA's certainly going to continue to do that. If we get anything started commercially in space, I think we have to allow people to take their own risks. Relationships are always risky, and so what? We're all adults, we know that. You know, I've heard it said, well, we can't allow anybody to be born on the moon because we don't know if they could ever come back to Earth, or if they would ever grow up normally or develop normally or anything like that. How are we ever going to find out unless we do it? There's no way. You have to take the plunge. So a lot of things that aren't allowed now, we're gradually going to have to take the brakes off. So this is basically all I'm going to say before we get on to the next talk. But there are a lot of things. We have to change the whole culture of the behind how we do things in space, if we are ever going to get out of small bases with people up there for only limited tours of duty. Take a look at Antarctica. It's now 60-some years after Little America. How much progress have we made from outpost garrisons to settlement? None at all. We don't want to be trapped the same way on the moon or Mars. So we got to start doing things differently. And these are just some things to think about. Some things are little that we can do now. Other things we have to wait until we're there. And that's all I'm going to talk about now.